This is Gary Atencio with CNTV, and today we're in Florida. I'm here introducing Life Recycled, a no-nonsense publication where creating a new normal in the face of chronic illness is explained in its pages of this author's journey. I am joined here with the author, Linda. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off a little bit about yourself. I mean, you were formerly educated at St. Petersburg College and the University of South Florida. You majored in music as a double major in voice and organ performance. Your performing career spans over really a half a century, and it continues to this day. With 50 plus years of teaching, you really believe you do not teach subjects, you teach people. Share with us, first of all, what life was like before your diagnosis.
Well, I was sick a lot, and as often happens, particularly with women in high stress jobs, it was you're working too hard. You need to rest more. You're okay. I was a single mom with two kids, and I had to support them. And I was doing graduate school and working 2 to 4 jobs at any given time. So you could understand why they would say, oh, it's just stress. And finally, in 2002, I believe, I ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks, and it still took over a week for them to figure out what was wrong.
Interesting. As they say, stress kills. It's not just a phrase. Obviously, it's something that can hurt all of us. In a world filled with many sick people, really, why is it we are rarely taught how to be sick properly, would you say?
People don't talk about it much. Some people are ashamed that they are not well. They blame themselves, or their friends and family blame them as well. You know, you should go gluten-free, eat some kale, go walk, and it's your fault if you're not well. So people often don't share that, and they perceive the sharing of the emotional issues as some kind of a weakness, perhaps. So it needs to be said out loud so that people don't feel that way. Half of all Americans have at least one chronic illness.
Absolutely. And now with modern technology, we've got more ways to diagnose us, so we're finding out more of us are sick than we actually thought about in the first place. Your journey into writing really was spurred by a debilitating diagnosis of systematic lupus. How did that personal health crisis really transform your purpose from teaching and ministry to focusing on chronic illness?
The common thread is making life better for people, whether it's children or adults with chronic illness or older people or refugees or whatever it is. The common thread in my life is to leave this world a little better than when I came in. When I was diagnosed, I was 51. I could no longer work. My kids were grown by then. I spent 4 years in poverty, on disability, barely able to function. And at one point, I started having suicidal ideations, and I thought, whoa, this is a bad thing. You better go get some help here. So I did, and I went to a psychiatrist, and he didn't get it. And I was furious. And I took that anger and said, if I'm going through this, other people are going through it. And some of them found a way to have a life. And some of those people wrote books. I will go find their books. And so I set out on a quest during those 4 years to do all of that. My first book I co-authored with a physician, may he rest in peace. I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I never wrote a book. I don't. He said, let's do it. I'm published. And then I wrote the next one for support group leaders, and now Life Recycled. And I wrote it once, and it was terrible. It was just awful. It was preachy. It
Yeah.
was simplistic, and I put it aside. And then Amazon had this contest, like $25,000 for an indie book. I'm like, I'm going to do that one. I went back, locked myself up for a couple weeks, maybe 2 weeks, and rewrote all 365
Gee.
reflections in
So
that book.
really what motivated you there was this contest, which, like you said, you didn't win, but it was the motivation you needed to get back in there and write. So you found a lot of information in books. You mentioned initially, really, that you hated creative writing and you found research papers excruciatingly painful as a youngster. What kind of changed your perspective and made you realize that writing could be enjoyable?
As part of my work in music ministry, I had to write newsletter articles. As part of my work as program director of the Lupus Foundation of Florida, I had to write articles. And I found out that why I didn't like creative writing was because it was somebody else's topic, not mine. And when I'm writing about things about which I'm passionate, it's easy, it just flows. So that was the transition, the purpose in the writing.
I mean, in school, we're forced to write about things we maybe don't want to write about. And yet you get out in life and realize you have so much to share, it becomes easy. You co authored, like you say, your first book, 100 Questions and Answers about Chronic Illness, with Dr. Robert Norman asked, after he really asked you to collaborate, what was it like to work on a book with a scientific background in mind for your first writing project?
That was a challenge. It took a lot of research, which I know how to do, academic research. Dr. Norman was absolutely brilliant. He was on faculty of Nova Southeastern. He's published many, many times. So I had him along with me, and he encouraged me. And honestly, I did a huge chunk of the writing uh, in gratitude for being published by a publisher.
Interesting. You've since written multiple books. Your major professor told you to write the book you wish to read. How did that advice kind of shape the creation of your day by day book, Life Recycled?
Well, what I know is that when my lupus is flaring, it often causes inflammation in my brain. So it's difficult to concentrate on long chapters of things. So, first, I knew that I wanted something that patients could grab, open anywhere, read for 2 minutes, and feel a little bit better. That's part of where that came from. Then I took the tools that I learned, which were cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness, and employed them in the book. But what happened with the first edition, so to speak, is it didn't work for me. And when I went back, I thought, who are the authors whose work in this field stimulate me, that I read everything they write? And what is it that they do? And the answer was storytelling. And so when I rewrote the book, I used storytelling, knowing and respecting that the reader is smart enough to get the point of the story without me hitting them on the head.
Interesting. I mean, so you're basically saying people with chronic illnesses, especially during a flare up, might have a hard time reading long chapters. How many pages and chapters are in Life Recycle? And what will the reader learn about your journey? I mean, do they have to read the whole thing to get it all? Or can you really grab some pieces and still come away with something?
There are 365 short reflections, usually less than a page. Okay. And the way it works, I use dates simply to keep myself on track and make sure I had 365 of them. What I have found in the people who have read my book and responded is that they keep it handy at home, in their bedroom, in their living room. And when they're feeling kind of off, they just pick it up and open anywhere because the book is not sequential. Each topic, each reflection is complete by itself. So anybody can open anywhere. And I'm always thrilled when readers let me know, I keep it in my bedroom and I look at it before bed at night. Like, yes, I hit the nail on the head.
That's great. So they really utilize it in a way that's easy for them. I mean, you mentioned earlier that after realizing the first draft of Life Recycled was horrible and preachy, you decided to focus on storytelling. What specific storytelling did you incorporate in it to make the content more engaging, would you say?
I took stories from my own life and experience, but also as program director of the Lupus Foundation for the state of Florida, I worked with many patients and heard many stories from these people. So sometimes I took composite stories, took several people's stories, and wove them together in a reflection. And writers often do that in nonfiction. They'll create a composite kind of a person. I have, when I write, I have an avatar. My avatar's name is Betty. She looks like Betty White. When I sit down to write, I'm writing as if I'm having coffee with her. And I also read the manuscript out loud several times because the language changes when you do that. It becomes more personal and it
It
honors
definitely
the reader.
does. That's why so much is lost in translation when people text or they message. You have to kind of change it so it's like a dialogue. I understand that. You intentionally integrated the tools of cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness into your book. How do these psychological approaches help people with chronic illnesses, and why was it important for you to include that?
Well, there's a huge word, Ed, in this psychoneuroimmunology, and that is the connection between the body and the mind, which is often ignored in today's medical landscape. The truth is that what you think causes what you feel, and what you feel causes physical changes in your body. If you observe what you think and you change those thoughts, you change the entire cascade.
Wow. That, like you say, that is definitely a missing piece in healing today when it comes to traditional medicine and whatnot. And you are currently writing your fifth book, Curse God and Die. It addresses difficult topics like guilt, blame, shame, and stigma in illness and religion. What was your inspiration for tackling such a complex and sensitive subject?
55 years of working in religious institutions and having people tell me, just pray and you'll get better, or whatever they come up with. They have a lot of those kinds of things. I thought, why are they doing this? Why do they say these things? And what happens is they say these things because they want to make themselves believe that what happened to me is not going to happen to them. That's number one. Number two, there are tacit judgments, messages under the message. Like, if you only do what I tell you, you'll get better. Since you don't do it, you really don't want to get better, or you're faking it, or any of those messages under the message. So after the book traces the roots of guilt, blame, shame, and stigma in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it moves on to things like COVID and Hurricane Katrina, where people also assigned blame. And the last part is the hardest to write. That's where I am right now. And that is, how do you respond to these people? And how do you identify the message under the message and respond in a way that does not alienate the very people you need in your life?
I've heard that my whole life. My family, they say, I'll pray for you. I tell them it's a cop out because faith without action is useless. I mean, we need more than prayer. We also need action in that. So I've been brought up in that environment as well. I mean, your book description says you trace the origins of guilt and blame in the Judeo-Christian scriptures. I mean, for a woman who grew up in Catholic schools, what was the most surprising thing you discovered during your research process?
Well, one of the things is that I had never read the entire book of Job. And when Job has lost all of his children, all of his livestock, he gets boils all over his body and sits on a dung heap, scratching them with shards of pottery. His wife comes up to him and says, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" And Job says, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And he sits there scratching his sores. Then his three buddies, after he sits the Jewish period of Shiva, they come to him and they say, "What did you do wrong?" The revelation in this story is that it all happened because God and Satan made a bet. Satan said, "If you take all the good stuff away from this guy, he won't like you anymore." And God says, "Okay, you could do everything but kill him." And that whole thing, his three friends who sit there for days with him, all they're doing is trying to find out what he did wrong. So then where else does this happen? It happens in Adam and Eve in Genesis. It happens in the flood. It happens in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's there and it doesn't always make sense. And it has nothing to do with your morality. Stuff happens. Life is imperfect. Creation is always evolving.
Puts a whole new spin on everything happens for a reason. That's the way we look at that and understand those challenges are for us. You believe communication is essential really to the success of any endeavor. You're a speaker, you have a Substack blog and a podcast. How do these platforms extend the mission of your books and allow you to connect with your audience really in different ways?
It's interesting. I'm fascinated by the statistics of the blog and the podcast. So as soon as I launch, the first thing I do is go to the dashboard and see how many people opened it. And I make a space for comments. And I do hear from people, and it's fascinating. They say, "This is what I've been thinking. This is how I feel." And nobody says that you gave me a voice. And then I always have a link to my book so they can go there, but they can also interact with me and I respond to everyone who responds to my posts.
So really about communicating with people, making a connection out there, really beyond the books. Linda, your career has always been service with a strong commitment to leave this world a little better than when you came into it. You now teach others we can stay stuck in grief, mourning who we were, or we can create a new normal. Is this rewarding work for you?
It's very rewarding. And recently, last fall, I was hospitalized for 8 weeks and they gave me up for dead twice, which was not fun. But they didn't tell me, they told my kids. So therefore, I lived anyway. When I got home in December, I could not walk without a walker. I could barely care for myself. Right now, I'm in the running for a couple of marvelous jobs. One of them is assistant editor for a very well known doctor, and another one is an organ playing job. And I get calls every week to play somewhere because that's what my degree's in. So, once again, after losing everything at age 72, I am taking my own advice and creating a new normal. Yeah, I had grief for a while. Like I can't do this again. I can't, not again. Then I thought, well, what's the option? And
Well,
so I'm building a new life again.
yep. Always rebuilding. And like you say, you'll probably go back and read some of your own words and you're inspired by them. And like you say, listen to your own advice. Fantastic story. Viewers, let's take a look at the bottom of the screen. What you're going to see is her Chronic Life website where you can subscribe to her blog. You can also find her books on Amazon and you can connect with her on LinkedIn to find out when her next book will be available. Her journey has taught her that illness is a thief that steals our lives and our very identities. Although you may not know the why of chronic illness, but you do get to choose what's next. Once again, that is life recycled, creating a new normal in the face of chronic illness. This is Gary Atencio with CNTV, and if you don't know, now you know.